Hello again, and welcome back to another edition of the Wiccan Conservative. Today we are going to discuss this hosh-posh of media spin that has been going on in the news cycle lately. I know that I have been kind of silent after the impeachment and kind of working on some separate issues with the event that's coming up and talking about civic duties and things like that. But I think it's time to get back to the news and understand what is being told to the American people and what we should be focusing on when we hear these things from the news. So I've kind of been thinking that the American people have a battered women syndrome when it comes to the mainstream media. It's a very abusive relationship where we are getting part facts and part lies and part of, a love-hate type of relationship. If we did not have the media, we wouldn't know where to start to get get information, and we wouldn't be looking for the answers that we are now looking for if we weren't told so many lies. So it's almost like we're in an abusive relationship where the person is telling you that they love you, but they're lying to you, and you keep kind of going back. So to me, it's like a battered women syndrome, and it's a very vicious cycle that we're in. So today we're going to start with this tweet from Barack Obama. And as you can see, it's up on the screen here. It's talking about the Recovery Act and paving the way for a decade of economic growth and the longest streak of job creation in American history. Now, if you listen to the mainstream media, there are economists that are saying that this is partially true. We did go through a recession during the Bush administration. We were in a very dire economic state. I don't know how many adults remember, being under the Bush administration and then going into the Barack Obama years, but it was something that was absolutely devastating when you were talking about financial situations and financial straits. I know for my family personally, me and my husband both worked. It was very difficult for us to get caught up on our bills. We accumulated a lot of debt, and we didn't fall into the class that benefited from any of the programs that Obama had put into place. We were considered middle class Americans, although I don't believe that our income brought us to that tier or to that stature by any means, because we were still struggling pretty well. But when you talk about creating jobs after a recession, I'm not an economist by any means, but just listening to different economists, it's easy and logical to understand that when there is a recession, the equal and opposite reaction to a recession would be to progress, to have a progression. So, of course, if there is jobs being created and there's work coming into play, that yes, you would be responsible for bouncing back from that recession. And I understand at least that much. But when you take into account the 8 years of absolute extreme, I would say, detrimental effects to the workforce, in the case that there was more welfare being spent on the people, and there was more taxes coming out to support those people who claimed they could not get jobs and didn't want to get jobs at that point. And what we were being told by our administration at the time is that there were no jobs to be had, and these people were retiring. The baby boomers were retiring at a rapid rate, and that's what was kind of adding to the unemployment rates, and that's why they were getting higher. That these people just they couldn't find work. So we heard a lot of excuses for why we needed to build into the programs, why we needed to create the healthcare situation, the Obamacare that we ended up getting ourselves into, and trying to come to grips with the fact that it is what it is. It was just going to be this way pretty much, for the rest of time. We needed to come out and make a bureaucratic legislation that put safety nets into effect for certain areas of manufacturing and technical skills. So they created a whole bunch of different EPA laws, and they shut down coal miner factories and steel manufacturers, and took a lot of jobs away from the people because of environmental issues and things to that effect. So when Trump come into office, and the first, I think it was the first 180 days that he was in office, that he went ahead and deregulated a whole mess of Obama's kind of restrictions on that type of industry, on the mechanic industry, on the coal industry, on the oil industry, and started bringing those jobs back. And when you listen to the economists tell you that, yeah, we can give Barack Obama credit where credit is due, and say that you started this chain of events or this action, and it's true. You started to bring back some of the recovery to the economy. We can't give you the credit up until this point, because at a certain point the jobs market stopped creating jobs. You created X amount of jobs, and it didn't get any better, and you were still suffering from a terrible unemployment number. And then when the deregulations went into play after Trump took office, the jobs number started growing again. And one of the analysts actually put it quite interestingly that, it's more impressive to create jobs when most of the people already have jobs. And when you think about it that way, it actually is really logical to come to the conclusion that it is a much greater feat to employ the most unemployed people. And what I mean by that is that, obviously when everybody's working, you have to seek out actual people that don't have a job or don't want to work. So when you're reaching out to those type of people, and you're getting them employed in the workforce, and you're putting them onto a higher income rate, it actually is more impressive than, say, bouncing back from a point in time where there was extreme unemployment and people who weren't getting back to work. And another thing that they like to cite in Trump's favor is that the average median household income is coming up as well. And I have to look again at my own situation, where, yes, I did leave the state of Pennsylvania, which is highly regulated, highly taxed. It's a, blue state. And I come to Georgia, and there's a lot less of that down here. Now, we're still kind of learning to navigate, because we were born and raised in Pennsylvania, so things down here are almost like a completely different country. But, we went from having a double income household to a single income household, and we're still making more money down here than we did up there. And I don't necessarily think it's because we moved states per se, as much as I think that, it's right. The average median household income has gone up, and people are getting paid more for skills in the technological and mechanical fields. My husband was in gas detection up north, and he came down here, and he is now in he's in avionics. So it's different than it was up north, and obviously, we've benefited from the economy being what it is. So for, Obama to bash Trump and everybody that kind of follows the Joe Biden narrative and, really like the things that were going on under Barack Obama, he had the tweet that said that there was no, or I'm sorry, not tweet, he was actually speaking at a conference, that there was no magic wand to bring back jobs, and kind of mock Trump, like, what are you going to do differently that brings back jobs? And you can't just wave a magic wand and bring back jobs. And it's not that he waved a magic wand. It's that, he cut back on the regulation and actually started letting people take jobs that were highly productive, that allowed us to manufacture things back in the good old US of A and get back to working with their hands. Not everybody can go to Silicon Valley and be a tech genius or a tech giant. A lot of people choose to work with their hands. And with the state of our colleges now, I think that that's a smart idea, is to send our kids to tech school and send them to a place where they learn to work with their hands, and that they learn to be mechanics and be coal miners and be oil refiners, and kind of develop those skills, because we're not to the point where those are dead industries. We are actually, still competitive in that market. And I think it's because of the deregulation that Trump has passed. And honestly, in a free market economy, we should be deregulizing. We should not be worried about bureaucratic legislation to kill the businesses, or, as Chrisanne Hall would like to say, these unappointed, unelected committees that are out there for our safety, because they are not regulating what they should be regulating, and we're no safer with these legislations in place. So it's a big spin, in my opinion, to sit here and take credit for something that's happening while you're not even in office anymore. And it's hard to wade through these things for the regular average American person, because we're not economy majors. We kind of tend to just listen to what these people are telling us about our budget, because we don't necessarily take the time to go and read the budget or go and analyze the budget. Some of you may. I happened to look over this year's budget that was passed, end of last year, and God, it's like 1,000 pages long. And even if I sat through and read each and every page, there's a lot of it that's not graspable to the average American citizen. It's worded in such a way that you need an attorney basically to tell you what's going on with it. So that's the first spin that I just completely couldn't come back from. It was really hard. I was left kind of reeling from the people who actually bought into this and did a lot of listening to different people. Which brings us to the Democratic debates. So I have up on the screen here highlights just from a Bing website. And as you can see here, there's all different kinds of spin here. The Las Vegas Democratic debate highlights: Bloomberg comes under fire. Bloomberg battered by progressive Democrats. Elizabeth Warren came out swinging. Bloomberg was left battered. So the first thing that jumps out to me is, the battered. They're absolutely right. I did catch some highlights of this, and I was listening to a couple different analyses on it. I listened to Dan Bongino. I listened to Anthony Brian Logan. Of course, I listened to Steven Crowder because he's hilarious. So, when I read through some of these articles and went and watched some of the highlights myself, it's kind of funny to watch these Democrats on stage, because a lot of people will tell you that they're not running on the same platform and that they're pulling the party in opposite directions. But I don't necessarily buy into that narrative either. I think that they're pulling the party extremely left, no matter which way you look at it. They want total government control. And the only thing the difference between their opinions and their ideas is exactly how much government control they want. So Elizabeth Warren has been dropping in the polls. She's not been performing at any of the caucuses very well. We all know. Let me ask you this real quick. This is a little bit off topic, but what happened to the Democratic narrative that Joe Biden was Trump's biggest threat? I'm not seeing anything about this on any mainstream media since the impeachment has ended and his terrible showing at the Iowa caucus, since we're speaking of caucuses and people dropping in the polls. I want to know what happened to that narrative. Where did that go? That was the main idea of the impeachment. That was the main reason, because Trump was so scared of Biden, and now we don't hear from it anymore. But I digress. Warren's dropping in the polls. So the first thing that she did in this Democratic debate was to attack Mike Bloomberg. And I think that they are picking on a candidate who resembles a Democratic version of Trump. He's got a lot of money. He has made some past mistakes, if you will. I don't know anything about his indiscretions or his companies or anything about him personally, but the things that they were talking about on stage alluded to some of the narrative that they have already accused Trump of doing and being a part of. So I think that they pick him out as an easy target. Not that I agree with any of his policies, and I'm not feeling sorry for him, but I think that if they feel like he's an outsider because he might be the most centrist Democrat on the stage. And that's not hard to do when everybody's so far to the left. But if you look at what he's saying and you're looking at his past history and things and bills that he's supported, he is your typical Democrat. Solely speaking on his policy and his ideas and his thought processes. But it also kind of brings up the hair raising on the back of your neck type feeling when you hear the way they attack him for his ideas and his policies and who and what they compare him to. So another big thing that was going on was the, I guess, woman power on the stage, and Klobuchar and Warren kind of going tit for tat on, the men and kind of bringing up sexism and trying to say, I think Klobuchar had a moment where she asked Pete, are you calling me incompetent? Am I not, fit to do the job? Because I'm a woman, and I think that you men need to step aside. And there's all different kinds of sexism being hurled on the stage. And honestly, I haven't watched any of the debates all the way through. I just can't stomach it. But when I come back and I look at the highlights, it gives me a pretty clear picture as to what's going on the stage. And I think it's funny because even in some of the highlights, you can hear the crowd getting out of control and being vocal and kind of going against what these candidates are saying and what's going on, because you hear it in the background and see what's going on stage and how these people are reacting. So where do we think that they're going to actually be able to carry out even a third of what they're preaching to the American people? How are they going to keep us safe through their big government platform when they can't even keep their debates in order? I happened to see a Bernie Sanders rally kind of go off the rails, and I thought it was funny because ABL did two videos, I think it was, in his one clip. That one was from 2015. There was a rogue supporter that jumped on stage and hijacked pretty much his rally. And then there was one just the other day that, these girls, I guess they come up topless and were, I don't know what the heck they were protesting, but they hijacked the rally, and it was absolute insanity. How do you trust these people to keep you safe and keep you in the lap of luxury, so to speak, because that's what they're preaching to you, that you'll be much better off under their policies and their procedures, when they can't even control the radicals that support them? And that's exactly what these people are. They're radicals, and they don't want to listen to anybody in power. Let's be honest. They have been emboldened and empowered to the point where everybody's bad. Even the people that they support are bad. And, if you know anything about the transition of government, anarchy is just a step away from an oligarchy or a communistic type of government structure, because it is the transition period in between governments. So you go from having your republic into typically a democracy, and then it goes into anarchy, and anarchy cannot survive. So you look to somebody who can protect you, and that person who can protect you usually ends up taking up a army or a faction that controls everything. So you move very quickly from a people-ran government to a completely government out of control ran type of society. And it's not pleasant by any means. And you can see way through the history books the transition of governments and how it moves very, very quickly from one end of the spectrum to the other. So, throughout the Democratic debates, there was a lot of virtue signaling, and there was a lot of calling out their own hypocrisy, which I found kind of funny. Even, in the, half hour that I listened to these wonderful debates, I think Bloomberg called out Sanders for his 3 houses. And of course, Bernie sat there and, well, I have a house because I work here, and I have a house there because that's where I live. And then, of course, I have a summer home. How many people do? He kind of made it sound like how many people don't have a summer home. I don't have a summer home. Sorry, Bernie, no offense, but most people don't have that kind of luxury. Most people aren't going to be able to afford 3 homes. That's just, it's asinine if you ask me, and it's totally hypocritical that you're sitting on the stage and telling people that they don't need millionaires and billionaires, and you should tax these people beyond all recognition, but you own these things and you have these things, and then you come back and assume that that's the average American with a summer home and 2 different houses that they can, live in. But it's gonna get funnier as we get closer to election day. I don't see anybody pulling ahead. They say Bernie is ahead, and it's a race between him and Buttigieg, and I just don't see anybody emerging. I think they have split their party beyond recognition, and they're making it extremely hard for even Democrats to pick a number 1 candidate. I mean, you look at the 2016 race between Hillary and Bernie, and it was really neck and neck there until Hillary kind of swooped in and took over the nomination. So, you only had really 2 candidates that were battling it out. When you take all those votes, and instead of splitting them 50-50 between 2 candidates, you split them 4 ways, or you split them even 5 ways if you want to throw Biden into this mix, which I think he's done. I think he should just bow out gracefully, but I digress. When you split your votes like that, you're not unifying your party. You're not getting them to back one candidate and saying, that's our guy. So you're taking away from your spending power as far as your votes are concerned. And of quite honestly, I believe that that will be the demise of the Democratic Party. I don't think that it has anything really to do with numbers showing up on the Republican side or the, support that Trump has, or even the independent and, Tea Party and Green Party and all the other different votes that are out there. I don't think that that's going to sway anybody into influencing a candidate on the Democratic side. So next up on the agenda is the Virginia Democrats join Republicans to reject assault weapons ban bill. Now, this was interesting to me because it came up on all my Second Amendment websites as a huge victory for 2A and all the wonderful things about Republicans and Democrats coming together and rejecting this assault weapons ban. And, it was such a great victory, and it was celebrated as such. Then I did a little bit of research into what actually happened. So it turns out that the bill was rejected, but it was only rejected for this session and can come back into play come next year when they go back into session. And I think it has to be shelved for a year before it can come back into question. Now, why was it shelved? And if you read into this, you will find out that it was shelved so that they could do more research into the correlation between assault weapons and mass shootings and different crime rates that are committed with this style gun. So honestly, to me, the very first thing that I thought of was this is going to be an epic snow job. They are going to find some sort of way to correlate this new information into their investigation or into their research or into their studies that this is actually a really dangerous gun and there is absolutely no reason for anybody to own one. And then they were going to proceed to do the ban anyways. Then I started looking into the sales of the gun. And it looks like there's an increase now that this bill has died, so to speak. There's been an increase in sales. And something else dawned on me. And when you go back into the Virginia legislation, and I was telling you about that before the rally in January, that if you look at this legislation, there's a lot of stipulations for how they're going to prosecute criminals when it comes to violation of these bills. Not only are they upping the ante on the types of charges that you're getting if you violate these bills, but you're also seeing increased jail time. And I believe, I would have to go back and look for sure, but if I remember correctly, there was also a stipulation where these criminals were going to have to pay to be in jail. I mean, more than your average fines or leverage. There was some sort of, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, there was some sort of stipulation regarding paying back into the criminal justice system for your stay in the jail. And I don't know about anybody else, but I made a connection between the buyer surge and possible increased criminality. And is this going to end up being a cash flow scheme for the state of Virginia? And was this part of the reason why they shelved this bill for the time being? So just bear with me here. It sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory, but what better way to generate revenue than to hold off on this bill, let the sales increase naturally, revisit it next year when the actual ownership of this type of gun has gone up, and then either institute some sort of relinquishment program. They call it a buyback program, but I don't think they're going to actually be buying back and reimbursing anybody for the money that they spent on these guns. And if you refuse, and Virginia has already come out en masse and said we will not comply, how much money can you raise from jailing your citizens or fining your citizens after you have them all on a registry, after you have the sale of the guns and you know where they are? Because they passed, I believe it was 7 in total of the restrictive legislation laws. And I'd have to go in and look. Again, we've been spinning around on this carousel with the media spin for so long. I didn't even think about it until, I went to write my talking points for this video. But I believe that there was some sort of bill with the registry being more restrictive, and they needed to have more information and more background checks and more personal things about whoever was going out to buy these weapons. So now that they're armed with all that information after you go to buy or purchase your weapon, now they can come back, reinstitute this bill, and have all the information they need to prosecute you for it. So it's something that we need to be aware of. And, I'm excited that the Democrats were, able to see the Republican side for once and watch those two houses in Virginia come together to block this ban. But in a way, I'm a little bit wary. Anytime that you see cooperation between the two parties, you know that there's got to be a reason for it, because they don't typically work together without some sort of benefit to themselves. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out. And I'm not quite ready yet to jump on the celebration bandwagon, no matter how much spin the media puts on this and says, oh, this is a great thing, this is a great thing. But I digress. On to our next topic. And that is my favorite topic. Nancy Pelosi still insists Trump was not acquitted. He is impeached forever. Now, that's fine. If you want to claim that he's impeached forever, I get it. I get it. The impeachment articles were filed. There's really no way to remove that from the history books. That is going to be in the history books every time we revisit the presidency. It's going to be that they tried to impeach the president. I will give you that, Nancy. But to say that he was not acquitted, where is your brain? I don't understand. You stood up and told the American people that you were for the Constitution and you were for our founding fathers and you believed in this and that and the third, but you can't understand he was acquitted. I don't care what you feel happened as far as witnesses and evidence. We sat around for a week. We didn't need to have a physical testimony because we knew what we were getting when the House made their case. They played videos. They read verbatim quotes. They said every single thing that was said in the House inquiry to us on screen for their witnesses. So in actuality, yeah, you did have your witnesses testify, but we didn't have to have them in the Senate. We didn't have to bring their physical bodies to the Senate to get what we already knew that they were going to say. And I think it's kind of funny that John Bolton has come out, and I read an article that he said that his testimony wouldn't have influenced the Senate's acquittal. And I agree with him. I really don't think that his testimony would have had anything to do with anything. It's quite easy to say what happens behind closed doors now that you're not part of the administration. And again, with this media spin narrative that we're working on right now, you could say whatever you want to say and people are going to believe you and people are not going to believe you. At the end of the day, I was a supporter of John Bolton. I thought that some of the things that were going on with Iran and their random attacks was worthy of a response. And I did believe that we were showing some sort of weakness by not responding. And I couldn't understand the strife between he and Trump at the time. And now, with hindsight and knowing where we stand and what was actually going on, logically to me, again, I think that Trump knew that that was a trap. It was trying to bait him into completing the Democratic narrative that he was going to start World War III. And by not completing that narrative, by going against what Bolton suggested, not only did it make the Democrats look foolish because their narrative never came to fruition, but it was a failed plot to get him out of the White House. So what did they do? They had to pivot and they had to spin again and say, well, look now, Bolton is telling us that, this was all Trump's idea. And this is all about Joe Biden, and it had nothing to do with national security, and it had this and that and the third. So with Nancy coming out and doubling down and trying to say that, there's no acquittal, and, you can't have an acquittal without witnesses and a trial, I think that's what it is. I think it's doubling down on what they know is a false narrative, and anybody that follows the path logically is going to come to the same conclusion. Nancy is out of her mind. There were no criminal charges, first off, in either of the articles that were brought to the Senate. And then second, we're still holding on to this as Democrats as our, platform to stand on. That, well, see, we did what we said we were going to do. We told you that we were going to impeach him, and it's the Republicans' fault that he wasn't impeached. No type of responsibility whatsoever for having to come to a constitutional standard to impeach and remove the president. But I guess if you're a blind follower of what you're being told, it looks like the Republicans committed another snow job. And that's exactly what they want you to think. And that's exactly what a lot of these people out here are thinking. And it's absolutely insane to me to listen to what she supposedly stands on and see what's actually happening with the presidency and how he's conducting business in the White House. Which brings me to, of course, Maxine Waters. And as we're going down this impeachment narrative, we're finding out a lot more. We know for a fact that the Russia collusion was a hoax. We know this. We know that the dossier that the FISA warrants were based on was fake. We know that that was paid for information. There's more and more information that's coming out. It came out somewhat in the Mueller report. It come out in the IG report. It's coming out in the Ukraine mess that's going on. I don't know what you want to call it, the investigation into Ukraine, but it's all coming into a bigger picture. And the more that you see, the bucking from the mainstream media and the pointing fingers of the Democrats, you can start to see the overall narrative of what's going on and why they're fighting this so much. Maxine Waters blasts Trump as a mafia boss over the Stone case. So when you find out that the Russia collusion was a hoax, when you find out that the information was paid for, and you find out that there are plenty of people who broke a lot of laws to get to the point where we were investigating a sitting president for a crime that never happened, you really need to think about who the mafia boss is. And what better way to take the attention off of yourself and onto somebody else but to point fingers and play the name game. Oh, no, it wasn't us, it was him. Like a 2-year-old. So they're getting upset that, again, their narrative is being blown, that Trump is not going to allow these miscarriages of justice when you have people on the opposite side who are doing the same thing. Maxine Waters even came out and had the nerve to call for the disbarment and an investigation into William Barr. Now, let me say that I am not impressed with what Barr has been doing, and I'm not 100% on the bandwagon that he's going to be the one to expose all of this. And I'm not following mainstream media narratives, because we'll get to that as our last talking point. But when you're being called out for disbarment, I mean, Maxine Waters, how much more can you muddy the waters but to come out and say, well, even the guy that's doing the investigation into this, who had nothing to do with the original probe or the original claims, is somehow miscarrying justice because he's even looking into this, it is crazy. First off, where do you even get the power to selectively say that you don't like what he's saying, so you want an investigation done, and you want he hasn't even come to an all-out conclusion yet. And we go back to the mainstream media spin, and I'll touch on my next point very briefly here, but you know, they were praising Barr for scolding Trump for his tweets and saying, you know, that it makes it very hard for me to do my job. And you know, I think that the left wing kind of took that and was like, oh, yay, look, check this out. And it's funny to me because I even said to you know, the people on the right who were kind of like, oh, you're right. He shouldn't be tweeting about that. And it is interference. And it's this, that, and the third. And I'm like, well, again, I don't understand where you people get that social media is so influential on your own minds and your own opinions. You're just admitting that you believe everything that you read on the internet and that you believe everything that is basically told to you. Where do you take personal responsibility for your own thoughts and your own actions, as opposed to, you know, well, Trump said it, and you know, that means that he's definitely, he knows what's going on inside the case, and he knows, you know, way too much, and he's trying to divert the attention here, divert the attention there. I don't buy into that. I don't think that that's what's happening. I think that he has an opinion, and he has a right to have an opinion. And to be honest with you, that's the only way that we know about what's going on behind closed doors, is the fact that the president is tweeting about it. Does he exaggerate? Yes. Is he wrong sometimes? Yes, absolutely. But so am I, and so are you. And honestly, to get to a point where you know fact over fiction, you have to come to that conclusion yourself. And there is no your truth and my truth, and there's just the truth. There's the truth, and it's somewhere in between the fact and the fiction that's being told to you. So you can have an opinion. I have an opinion. I don't have a problem expressing my opinion. As a matter of fact, I don't know how many people have watched my past video on civic duties. Last time I checked, I think it was at 8 views. So I think my opinion is being shadow banned personally, but that's a whole nother story, and I digress. So, you know, have an opinion, but have one that's based on what's actually happening, and sort through what's being told to you and what is actually physically on paper as facts. Which brings me to my final point, and that is the William Barr is considering resignation. AP source says. My freaking goodness. Oh my goodness. Now, this has already been debunked. I know this. Barr has come out and said point blank, I never said that I was considering resignation. And, you know, I agree that I don't believe he was considering resignation. Like I said in my last point, that the left celebrated him for scolding Trump. And I think that they took that and tried to turn it into yet another narrative where, oh, maybe we were wrong. Maybe Barr is turning on Trump. Maybe he's coming and finding these documents and Trump isn't right about what he's tweeting and what he's talking about. And all of a sudden now he's on our side. And they really want to claim him on their side. They really want him to be doing the work for lack of a better word, for the deep state, for the cover-up job, for the people who are trying to get away with what I consider some of the most heinous crimes in the history of America. And I really think that they wanted him to be that. And I think they wanted to not only turn the right-wing base against William Barr, but they also wanted to turn the left wing into their minions yet again. So to sort out what's going on, personally, I think that we should, again, find out what's going on in the middle, in the median. And I think that is somewhere along the lines of Barr has to prove that he's non-biased. And how do they prove that he's non-biased? That's to come out and say some things that you feel appeal to all people. And that is scolding the president for tweeting. That is saying things that are amicable to the left-leaning narrative. Personally, I don't think that he's moving fast enough, or he's not being transparent enough. I'm not exactly sure, because we don't really know what all the information that he has collected. We don't know what he plans on doing with that information. And we don't know where he's going with his investigation. He's kind of being, very internal. And I agree, an investigation should be internal and it should be kept secret up until a point. But with what has happened and what the American people already know to be true, the only way that we get through the Russia narrative, the Ukraine hoax, the impeachment, and really start to unify this country again is through transparency. So whether it comes out that, he does find something on Trump, or it comes out that, there was something to the Russia interference with our elections, we have a right to know that. We need to be aware as American citizens. I don't think that it jeopardizes national security to where it has to be top secret or classified to know who in our government has been working against us. We have the right to know that. We have a right to know that so that we can vote accordingly. There's so much information out there that we can get our hands on that points in a certain direction that if you don't come straight out and you're not transparent with the information that comes from this investigation, there is going to be complete and utter chaos. Now, that could be what they want. At the end of the day, they could want to maintain complete, utter chaos. That's how they ended up profiting off of us for years anyways, is to continuously create divide and make the American people think that they need big government to step in and they need them to save them. But I think that Barr is in a very unique situation where he holds the keys to the future, and he can either continue with the cover-up and he can continue to defend his alphabet agency, or he can come clean and tell the American people the truth. And we can say, you know what? We've had enough of these agencies lording over us. We've had enough. And instead of spending the money on the federal agencies and the federal protection that we have bought into for decades now, we could start putting our money into our local agencies and our local police forces. Because let's face it, they're dying. We are having a shortage across the board for officers, and officer participation rate is down. and the attitude against our men and women in blue are is going to pot. There is an absolute movement against the police force, and I will say that not every police officer is just, and they're not all put on a pedestal. But I think that the lack of participation and the lack of funding going into the police force is attributing to the corruption on the police forces. Now, they shouldn't be making $1 million a pop, because at the end of the day, it is a civic service, and it is something that people should want to do because of the type of people that they are. And they should want to protect and serve their communities. But with that being said, if we can give more power to our local police force, where you know who they are. I can't name anybody in the FBI. I can't name anybody in the CIA. I can't name anybody in any of the other NSA, TSA, FDA. I can't name any of those people. But it would be nice to know my local police force. It would be nice to be able to name the people who are looking out for the crime in the community. And it would be nice to have oversight over them directly. So, at the end of the day, we don't need big government. We don't need these people to tell us what's good for us and what we should be doing or what we have to be doing. We need to start taking back, again, our personal responsibilities, our own civic duties, and demand that even this federal government come clean. Come clean and tell us what's going on, good, bad, ugly. I don't care what it is. We need to get to the bottom of what happened in 2016. And, if anybody watches The Blaze, I know that Glenn Beck did a piece. It's called The Ukraine Final Piece. And it was very interesting, very interesting. This money situation in Ukraine has been going on a lot longer than what we have been originally told. And I believe that. The paper evidence is there. The money trail is there. It was caught by a foreign government, not our own. And I think the question there lies, where did the money go after it hit Hunter's bank account? So get out there, start doing some research, fact check me. If you have a topic that you want me to cover, put it in the comment section, shoot me a line on social media. Everybody get ready for the Wear It Out Patriot Picnic. Sorry, that's a tongue twister. Wear It Out Patriot Picnic 2020 in May. I have more information coming as that works out. Right now, we're just kind of doing some promotion. So tell your friends, get on Facebook. Let me know if you're coming. And I will catch you guys on the next one.